Hello YouTube and fellow Star Wars collectors! On this episode of Toys Are the Way, we'll be taking a look at the latest vintage collection special action figure set, the Mandalorian Shriek-Hawk Training Group. If you're new to the channel or a fan of Star Wars collecting, be sure to smash a like on this video, remember to subscribe, ring that bell for notifications, or even become a channel member. Welcome back, gang. As you can see, I have the Amazon exclusive special action figure set from Season 3 of The Mandalorian, the Shriek-Hawk Training Group. Now this is a really nice addition to the collection. Typically we see a lot of Mandalorians that are just like one color palette, and I'm kind of really enjoying, the covert version that we're seeing here with all the different blues and greens and browns all mixed together, and I think it's a nice visual variety that's being added to our shelves. Now, I've already taken these figures out of the packaging, done a little bit of toy photography with them, and they're a really nice addition to the collection, but I will say there is a little bit of an articulation hindrance due to some of the reused parts here, but that's not a total deal breaker, and we will take a closer look at that later on in the video. But with all that said and done, let's take a closer look at the packaging and each one of these figures. Taking a look at our vintage style packaging, we have the Star Wars and Mandalorian logo, followed by special action figure set in 2 languages, and then Mandalorian Shriek-Hawk beneath it. Now, I personally think it should have been Mandalorian Shriek-Hawks, since there's more than one of them, or it should have said Training Group after Hawk, which I think would have been a little bit more appropriate, but perhaps they wanted the title not to be too long. Regardless, this is a very good set. We are very familiar with this type of packaging in the vintage collection, and it's a great way to get multiple figures out there at one time, and not have to put them, in an Army Builder 4-pack where you can't display them, and not necessarily every one of these figures needs to be carded, because they're, just kind of backgrounders. But we have some really good looking figures here. The last time that we saw this type of packaging was actually with the 501st set, and yeah, it's something that we're very familiar with, and I'm happy to see it once again. Taking a look at the side of the box, you had the Mandalorian and Star Wars logo once again, followed by special action figure set and a bunch of different languages. On the bottom, you have nothing really that is very important to us, and then on the other side, the same exact type of graphic layout. And lastly, on the back of the box, we once again have the Star Wars and Mandalorian logo nicely displayed up top and paired with the Vintage Collection, Disney, and Hasbro logos in the bottom right corner. Additionally, we have the classic racetrack, which helps frame this lovely image of all 4 of these characters from Season 3 of The Mandalorian. We have special action figure 4-pack, once again in different languages, and all in all, this is a really nice addition to our Mandalorian collections. Taking a look at our first Mandalorian out of the packaging, we have this stunning, great kit bash, in my opinion. I really like the look of this guy. He has a new chest plate, which is very unique and specific to his design, and it was one that really stood out to me in the show, actually. I just really like the design of it. It's kind of like bulkier and looks like more of a heavy infantry kind of character. But yeah, he's got a new upper chest plate, a new helmet. It's actually very similar to the one Din Djarin wears, but it has an articulated rangefinder, which is great to see. We want to see that type of, articulation on our rangefinders. It's also very, very small, but very impressive at the same time. So great job there, Hasbro. The helmet, of course, has, some really great range of motion on this figure because it's pretty much the Death Watch Mandalorian as the base for, this kit bash. So that's pretty much all that we're seeing here from like pretty much mid-waist down. These are those legs, which are great. You can see that they have a really nice range of motion when it comes to the bend of the knee, which is something we're going to talk about with some of the other figures. It goes well past 90, which is really phenomenal. Yeah, if you're not familiar with that character or like figure, it's got some really good range of motion, barbell hips, swivels at the thigh, rocker ankles, so it will be able to pose very, very nicely on your shelf display. The other thing that we have here that's new to this figure is the belt and holster. So that is specific to this guy, and I think it looks really nice. You got some great paint applications going on here with the oranges, the like maroon colors, the silver. I will say there is not much weathering or scuffing on the armor, which is a bit of a bummer, but I guess that's not a deal breaker. Here you have his Death Watch symbol on his pauldron, which is really cool to see. And then we have the jetpack, which is the ones we've been seeing now in the vintage collection with the standardized peg system, so you can swap these out with other figures, which is really cool. And yeah, for the most part, I was kind of like watching the episode and trying to compare the paint applications on here, and it's pretty accurate. There might have been a couple extra stripes of like white or something like that, but yeah, all in all, I think this guy looks really, really fantastic. Moving on to our next member of the Shriek-Hawk training group, we have this character who is pretty much a repaint of the Mandalorian Fleet Commander that we've seen recently in the line. Now, I think he looks pretty stunning. I really like all the paint applications that are going on here, and yeah, overall, it's a really good looking figure. But I will say this is one of the ones that has the articulation hindrance. So if we take a look at the bend at the knee, it is not quite the same as the last figure we were just looking at. It doesn't even reach 90, it's around a 45, which is a bit of a bummer when it comes to posing this figure, because you're not getting that full range of motion. I think you can do some pretty good poses with it. It has rocker ankles, and it has a lot of the articulation we want to see these days with the new barbell system. And yeah, it's a great figure, but it's definitely lacking and not quite as good as it could be. Now, if you take a look at the back of the knee here, you can see that hinge, and it's a bit of a shorter one when it comes to a lot of the figures we've seen in the vintage collection. And if I bring in that last character we looked at, you can see that his hinge is much longer, which actually allows that knee to go well past 90, which is, something I want to see on my action figures. And I think it's just something that the sculpting team might have overlooked, unfortunately. And it's definitely a bit of a shame because they are using these legs and kind of this base for a lot of Mandalorians that are coming out. Currently, we're going to see another release of this character as, that night owl that comes with the Imperial light cruiser hallway. And yeah, I just want to see these figures to their full potential and able to pose very effortlessly and very dynamically. So Hasbro, if you're watching, please try to, consider updating this. I know it's a small bit of tooling here that you'd have to redo, but the more articulation and range of motion, the better. But overall, taking a look at this guy, he is pretty great. I did say he is a repaint of the Fleet Commander, but the only thing that's really changing on here is that he has lower legs from the Book of Boba Fett. So that's pretty cool that they were able to, kit bash that and make that work. He also has, of course, a new belt and holster that is specific to him, which is nice. Yeah, and all in all, he's got articulated rangefinder, the perfect Mandalorian helmet that we like to see. He's got his Death Watch symbol there. He's also got this blaster pistol, which is very specific to him and another character, and it's the first time that we're actually seeing that mold in the line, so that's pretty cool. And then he also has this vibroblade, which is one of 4 accessories that comes with these characters. So all in all, a great addition to our collection, but I will say, it's definitely a bit of a bummer that we're seeing this hindrance with the articulation on a couple of these releases now. And moving right along, we have my favorite character from the bunch. Something about this Mandalorian really spoke out to me during all the promo images and Season 3 itself. I think it's something about that stripe, his comma, and just his overall really cool look that, speak to me quite a bit. So very happy that we're getting this one into the line. Here you can see he has that wonderful Death Watch logo on his shoulder pauldron, which is soft plastic and won't hinder any of his range of motion of his arms. And that's something we've been seeing on a lot of our figures. And this one specifically is a repaint of the one that we saw with the Fleet Commander and the previous figure. Now, this Mandalorian comes with his blaster rifle, which is the same one we saw with the Death Watch release some time ago. Now, it's really cool that they gave us a rifle. They should have given us all 4 rifles because each one of these characters has that rifle in the show. Additionally, Hasbro should have, sculpted the variant of this rifle. In the show, none of them actually had the scope. So that would have been cool if, they added a little bit more variety to the set and, gave us the proper rifle. Additionally, each one of these rifles is able to clip onto the jetpack in the show, and that's not something that we're getting here. So a little bit of a bummer, but I'm not too bummed about it. The rifle itself is made of that soft plastic that we've been seeing a lot of our accessories made in, and it's a little bit more of a dull gray rather than the pitch black that we saw with the Death Watch release. Moving on to the rest of this figure, he has a soft plastic skirt, which is not my favorite. I personally really would have liked to see soft goods over plastic always, in my opinion. And while they don't really hinder too much of his articulation, yeah, soft goods just would have been a really good look. But this is an exclusive and kind of a repaint, so they're not going to go all out of their way to make this the most perfect figure. Here you can see we have that pistol that goes into his holster and stays nice and snug, so you won't have to worry about losing that. We have that jetpack once again with slightly different paint applications on it. We got these like red cardinal looking stripes on it, as well as a darker gunmetal rocket on the top rather than that shiny silver. So that is pretty cool. He's got a bunch of different paint applications all over. I will say he could have used maybe a little scuffing here. The one in the show, has a little bit of battle damage. And then, of course, he's got this articulated rangefinder, which is always great to see. Additionally, this is another new type of helmet, very similar to that first character we looked at. It's very reminiscent of Din's with like just this indent here. And then, of course, it has, a different rangefinder and paint applications, which are rather, done well. I don't see any terrible, paint leaks or anything like that. His visor's clean, so that's always great to see. And yeah, all in all, very happy with this figure. Of course, he has the same legs as the previous one. We got the Fleet Commander uppers and then the Book of Boba Fett lowers. So yeah, he's not getting that full range of motion there, but for the most part, this character has a lot of articulation, a great crunch there, ball jointed, shoulders, elbows, hinges at the wrist. He will be able to do a bunch of different poses. And lastly, we have our female Mandalorian from the Shriek-Hawk training group, and I really, really like this one quite a bit. It is pretty much the Bo-Katan figure, repainted and given some new accessories, such as this soft plastic kama and new holster, as well as this soft plastic scarf, which is pretty good. I personally, always like soft goods, but I think this actually came out pretty well. And as for the kama, I think that's perfect. I don't think soft goods was needed here. This looks a little bit more like leather, so, trying to recreate that with soft goods would be a little challenging. So all in all, pretty good looking stuff here. And then you can see we have a plethora of paint applications on this figure. We've got the greens, oranges, this very light color, like bone color. We've got some gunmetal going on here. And then a couple more hits on the back on the jetpack. The jetpack is the same one that we've been seeing with most of our Mandalorian female characters, such as Bo-Katan and Casca Reeves, so it's a standard peg for those. It would be nice if, this was updated to where we could put, some of the other larger jetpacks on these female characters. So all in all, pretty good stuff here. You can see she has one of those unique vibro blades that we're now seeing, and they're very sharp, I will say, if you take a look at that one right there. So pretty cool. And then additionally, she comes with the standard Mandalorian pistol that we've seen with a lot of our Mandalorian releases. So different than the other characters that we see in this set. We've got a nice Death Watch symbol there on the soft plastic, which of course, if you're not familiar with the Bo-Katan and Casca Reeves, they have great range of motion, ball jointed everything. The new style barbell hips, which is really great, swivel at the thigh, a lot of different, points of articulation that'll get this character into a variety of action poses. So really good stuff there. Also, the rangefinder is articulated, so that is great. And I will say, taking a look at the helmet, man, they've done some really nice jobs with that paint application there. Lots of good hits, and yeah, I think it looks great. Also have some really good range of motion there as well. So a really nice addition to our female Mandalorian collections. Taking a look at the very, very small vibroblade accessories, you can see that we have 4 different unique vibroblades added to this set for the first time in the line. Now, I really appreciate these, and I think they're pretty neat accessories. I will say that it's a bit of a shame that you can't actually put these in a holster or sheath them in their boots. I guess they just could not make that work at this scale, and it would also require some new tooling, but I do appreciate getting these new vibroblades into the line. I think they look really cool, and they're kind of a neat accessory, although be wary and put them somewhere safe if you're worried about losing an accessory like this. And lastly, taking a look at the blaster pistols, we have the one that's been standard with most of our Mandalorian figures here on the right, and then we have the new one that is actually pretty cool in my opinion. It's got some nice sculpting on it, and it's a nice addition to our Mandalorian arsenal. Now, for the most part, all of these figures are pretty accurate to what we saw on screen, with the exception of mainly this guy here. So, now this is a great figure in general. I really like the articulation because it's got the lower legs from the Death Watch figure, but those boots are slightly inaccurate as to what we saw on screen. This character is supposed to have a left leg from pretty much, the Judge or one of those Scarif troopers, and then it's supposed to have actually a Stormtrooper leg on the opposite side here. Hasbro did not opt to do this. And originally, some of us were thinking maybe, they overlooked it, they're not paying attention, maybe they're being malicious, it's not in the budget, or whatever kind of excuses. But I have actually kind of realized that it's not entirely their fault, it's just the tooling of this figure. Now, if any of you have seen my recent review of the Blurg, where I do an update to the new Season 1 Mandalorian lower legs to give him rocker ankles, you will see that I have swapped out his legs with this similar tooling here. Now, this is one of the figures in the vintage collection that has the peg on the upper part of the thigh rather than the lower boot. So because of that, the Death Watch character also has that similar tooling to Din, and yeah, because of that, they could not, use these lower legs, which actually have this little peg on the bottom boot section, so it would not be compatible. So that's the main reason here that I've kind of realized why they weren't able to update these legs, which is a bit of a shame, but at the same time, I do appreciate that this character has much better articulation than the other males in this set. But feel free to let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Because for the most part, I think these guys look very accurate to what we saw on screen, and I think they make a great addition to our Mandalorian Covert collection. Season 3 of The Mandalorian introduced a handful of non-Mandalorian characters, but for the most part was saturated with repaint and kit bash opportunities, and Hasbro has wasted no time on delivering those types of figures with the addition of the Shriek-Hawk training group. By utilizing existing tooling from impeccable releases such as the Death Watch Mandalorian and Clone Wars variants, our covert numbers continue to grow in the vintage collection. While these figures are fully loaded with new style hips and rocker ankles, the lack of a full 90-degree bend at the knee really does hinder the posing capabilities of 2 out of the 3 male Mandalorians. The Fleet Commander tooling cannot properly take a knee when compared to the Death Watch figure, and for the most part just feels a little less fluid on the lower legs than other Mandos. The Shriek-Hawk female is definitely one of my favorites out of the set. The Bo-Katan base is an exceptionally articulated figure, and I look forward to future covert repaints using this mold. While some of the articulation on these figures is less than ideal and far from perfect, the set as a whole is great, and has some remarkably nice paint applications that help add some much needed variety to our shelf displays. Although, one could argue that some weathering and battle damage paint applications would have been a nice touch. While the set packs a bit of punch with new helmets, belts, and the inclusion of all new vibroblades, the lack of additional rifles is certainly a bit of a letdown. Regardless, it's time to put this Mandalorian training group to the test in some action figure photography. I hope you enjoyed this video and taking a look at this latest addition to our vintage collection shelves, the Amazon exclusive special action figure Mandalorian Shriek-Hawk training group set. Feel free to let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and don't forget to drop a like on this video and subscribe if you're new to the channel. It really helps and is always greatly appreciated. Thanks everyone, and may the Force be with you.